Alright, so today we'll be servicing the differential on this 2017 Chevy Silverado four-wheel drive. And a couple of tools that we'll be needing is right here, 3/8 drive ratchet, small extension, 10mm socket, brake cleaner, torque wrench, couple rags, and 3 quarts of gear oil, which I have Master Power 7590. So GM recommends that you service your differential at least every 30,000 miles. But I suggest if you do a lot of towing and things of that sort, then you kind of stick with their recommendations. Difficulty level on this, I would say about a 4, from a 0 to 10. Okay, so one of the things that GM did come up with was making reusable gaskets as of like 2008. So you can get maybe 2 or 3 different uses of one gasket. So before you start your process, you want to make sure that you can get this fill plug loose, because if you can't, then and it's seized up, then you won't be able to fill the differential back with oil. So I suggest that you break that nut first and make sure that you can remove it. So before you start your process, you want to have something that you can catch your oil in so it don't spill and run everywhere. And I have here this oil changing bucket that I'm gonna let it run down in. And I'm gonna break this nut and we can start the process. Alright, so we got the fill plug bolt loose. Now we can start taking these 10mm bolts from around the cover, which is 12 10mm bolts. So as you can notice, there's a bracket right here that's being held on by 2 of these 10mm bolts. What I like to do is kind of start with those so I can move these lines back up out the way, and I kind of want to leave one right here so when I do disconnect the rest of them, my pan don't just fall in me on my face or in the way. So I'll remove those bolts and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so after you remove all 12 bolts, as you can see, it kind of drained out, and like I said, GM recommends every 30,000 miles, and this truck has about 82,000 miles on it now. So as you can see, the cover was kind of wedged on a little bit, so just apply a little pressure and it should pop off. And there's your gear assembly. And what you want to do is, you know, kind of look in there and make sure you don't have any metal shavings or anything from the gear being worn and that good stuff. And also there's this gasket around it that you got to remove. So what I got here is a little pry bar, and I'm gonna gently pry it loose along the edges so I don't tear it, because like I say, it's a reusable gasket that Chevy came up with, or GM came up with, I'm sorry. So before I remove that, because I see a couple of flakes, the next thing you want to do is get you some rags and kind of cover up your gear assembly so you don't get all that trash down in it and that kind of stuff. And once I get this gasket removed, I'll be back with you for the next step. Alright, so now that I got the gasket removed, as you can see, all that gunk and whatnot around the housing, what you want to do is get you a razor and some brake cleaner, and you want to clean the whole surface around where the cover meets with the actual housing. And once you do that, your next step would be to clean your gasket and your cover. Make sure everything's all nice and clean before you go back to reassemble. And what I like to do is clean it all, spray it all down with brake cleaner and make sure it's all cleaned up. After that, we'll be ready for reassemble. Alright, so once you get all that gunk cleaned up and got it all clean and smooth all the way around the housing, I want to take you some brake cleaner and spray it all off. Clean it up a little bit. And kind of feel down in it. Well, actually before, but kind of feel down in it. Make sure you don't feel any shavings and that stuff. That sort of work. Kind of clean it out. And then, like I say, after that, we'll be cleaning the actual cover that mates onto the housing and the gasket. And we'll be checking the gasket and make sure that there's no cracks and all that good stuff. Alright, so here's the gasket, and we'll just kind of check around it and make sure it's not broke, anything like that. Check both sides, and, you know, all that good works. And then I'll be cleaning it along with the cover. And then we'll be ready for assembly. Alright, so I got the gasket and the cover clean. And again, you want to make sure that it's clean along the edges, because if not, it won't seat right and you'll have a leak and all that, and you'll have to take it off and do it all again. So, you know, just make sure it's clean, and around the housing is clean, so you won't have those problems. And after that, we're on to the reassembly part. Alright, so the next thing you want to do is go ahead and kind of put your gasket on your cover, so that way when you get ready to attach it to that, you won't have to keep trying to catch it and hold it and make it stay. So that way I find it kind of easy. And what I'm gonna do is I actually take a bolt, put through it, and start the assembly process. And once I get it up, I'll be right back. Okay, so now that I got all 12 bolts installed, I can move to the next process, would be to kind of snug all of them down before I torque them. And they should be torqued at 22 foot-pounds. And make sure you don't forget your brackets, because you don't want them to, you know, get in the way and drag and eventually break off or something like that. So yeah, you want to go ahead and snug them all down before you get to torquing them. And then after that, you can torque and you should be ready. And also, as you snug them down, I kind of like to snug them down in the star pattern, so that way I don't apply too much pressure to one side and make one side bulge out or something like that. So yeah, I like to go in the star pattern, you know, to kind of have everything seated even. And then after that, we can torque. Alright, so once you got everything good and snug, you want to go ahead and torque everything down with your torque wrench, of course. And the specs on this is 22 foot-pounds, so I'm going to torque everything down to 22 foot-pounds, and I'm going to torque it in the start pattern. And after that, I'll be ready to refill with gear oil, and we'll be about done. Alright, so now that we got everything tightened up and torqued in, next step will be to add the gear oil. So I'm going to be adding the gear oil, and basically you'll fill it until you start to see some drain. Once you start to see a drain, then that indicates that it's full. And after that, we'll spray the cover clean, make sure we get all that excess oil off, and we'll be set. Once again, GM calls for it to be right up under the fill hole, so I know it's filled once it starts to drill. So, like I said, you want to fill it until you see it drips. When it drips, that indicates it's full. And it's dripping. See the drip? And that lets me know that it's full. Then at that point, once it starts to drip, you basically just want to let it drip until it stops, and that kind of lets you know that it's where it need to be. After that, we'll tighten that drain plug on down and we'll give it a spin.